One of the first health books that I read was The Ministry of Healing by Ellen White. And on page 127 of The Ministry of Healing, this is in the chapter, The Physician, the Educator. Did you know that that's what the word physician or doctor means? It means teacher. And traditionally, that's what doctors were. They taught. I know in Australia today, there is Medicare, and Medicare is free health care. And if I was in an accident, I would be very glad for that free medical care where an ambulance would take me to hospital, and maybe if my leg was all smashed up, I would have surgery and the doctor would get that straight, and I'm very glad for the general anaesthetic while they repair my leg, and I would be very thankful that there was no bill to pay. I certainly do appreciate that, but unfortunately the health care has gone almost the other way, where people go all the time and it is free, and it has really stopped people investigating, how does the body heal? What can I do to work with the body to bring about a healing process? And because Medicare dictates that the doctor can spend no more than 15 minutes per person, you can't find out a lot in 15 minutes. And so it's really changed medicine a little bit, I'm afraid. But I'd like to quote a passage from that page. It says, "The only hope of better things is the education of people in right principles. Let the physician teach the people that restorative power lies not in drugs, but in nature. Disease is an effort of nature to free the system from conditions that arise because of a violation of the basic laws of health. In case of sickness, the cause should be ascertained, unhealthful conditions changed, wrong habits corrected, then nature is to be assisted in her efforts to expel impurities and re-establish right conditions back in the system." So, to me, that is the perfect formula. Ascertain the cause. How do you ascertain the cause? You investigate the history. That's what I said earlier, you become a private investigator. Unhealthful conditions changed, wrong habits corrected. Then, what we're going to look at this afternoon, nature is to be assisted in her efforts to expel impurities and re-establish right conditions back in the system. Every person, how many? Every person should have a knowledge of nature's remedial agencies and how to apply them. It is important both to understand the principles involved in the treatment of the sick and have a practical training to enable one rightly to use this knowledge. Nature's process of healing and upbuilding is gradual, and to the impatient it seems slow. I don't know about you, but I'm impatient. I want to be better now. The use of natural remedies requires an amount of care and effort that many are not prepared to give. The surrender of hurtful indulgences requires sacrifice. But in the end, it will be found that nature untrammeled does her work wisely and well. This week, when we've been looking at natural remedies, we've looked at the fact that the body will heal itself if given the right conditions. And we've also put a three-letter word up here, and that's investigating why or how did this start. And we also put a little four-letter word in the middle called time. Sometimes we have to give it a little bit of time. People say, how long will it take? Well, we've got a saying in Australia, how long's a piece of string? Do you have that saying here? It can be an inch long, it can be several metres long. It all depends. It depends how long the situation's been there, how chronic or how serious it is, also how diligent the person is to do what you've got to do to bring about a healing condition. In that same page, and I omitted to tell you this bit, because we have already previously gone over it, she says, these 8 laws of health are the true remedies. So that's the foundation. So no matter what the problem, that's where you start. And this is your guideline. That's how you tell if the person's doing it right or not. That's how you tell if they're in the right conditions or the wrong conditions. That's how you tell if they need to change some bad habits. But I'm so thankful that in Psalm 104 verse 14, the Bible says that God gave herbs for the service of man. So herbs can play a role in bringing about the right conditions for healing. So I'm not going to keep you very long this afternoon. I think the afternoon's the hardest time to stay awake. So I'm just going to give you a short little nugget that hopefully will whet your appetite maybe to investigate this a little bit more. And there are some very good books. One's called Holistic Herbal. And Holistic Herbal is a book that I really like. It's by David Hoffman. And a friend of mine who's a herbalist got me onto this. It's a great book for the home because every herb is photographed on white paper. So it's easy to identify. There's a quick summary of the main points of the herb, a quick illustration of how to use the herb and what to use it for. So it covers quite a bit. And at the end of the book, it tells you how to make herbal salves or herbal ointments. So just in one book, it covers quite a bit. I think it's a good guide to have in the home. What it's also got in the back of the book, it's got everything to do for the endocrine system, the herbs especially for the hormonal system. Then it's got another section, everything to do for the urinary. Another one, everything to do for the gastrointestinal tract. Another one for bones, and another one for brain. So it's got a whole lot of sections. So that makes it also easy too, because there's easy reference. But I'd like to target one area this afternoon, actually a couple of areas, but the one I'd like to target first is what's taken over the planet. My husband said we always wondered how Bible prophecy would be fulfilled, because it says there's going to be a time when the whole world is going to wander after the beast. How could that possibly happen? Well, we don't wonder anymore, do we? Because the whole world has been affected by this COVID, this type of flu. So I'd like to look at some things that one can do if someone gets a flu, because COVID is a strain of the flu, and 99% of people recover. Earlier in the week, in fact I think it was Tuesday afternoon, we looked at natural remedies. And we looked at something that can officially be called a herb, and that is the onion. Have you ever cut up an onion and started crying? So it directly affects the mucous membranes, doesn't it? Your eyes start running, your nose start running, so that's a very good herb to directly affect that. But we're not going to put onions anywhere near our eyes or our nose, are we? It can be quite irritating. Well, you might be surprised at where you can chop it up and put it on the bottom of your feet. Your feet won't protest, whereas up here will. And the biggest pores on the whole of your body are on the soles of your feet. So you can get a cloth, put a whole lot of onion on it, put your foot on it, wrap the cloth around it, put a plastic bag around it so you haven't got onion everywhere, and put a sock on. And that can clear the head and can clear the chest, and it's excellent to stop coughing at night. You can also chop up onion and layer it in a jar with honey, and fill your jar with chopped onion, honey, let it sit for 24 hours, and there you've got a very good cough mixture. Another one that is similar to onion is the garlic. And the garlic can be used, and for those who weren't here, I'll share with you the antibiotic sandwich. So here's a slice, and I think most people got a loaf of Tristan's bread, yeah? The sourdough simple needs bread, slice of toast, and then you put about a teaspoon of honey on that. No, sorry, olive oil. So you've got your bread, then you put olive oil on top, and then you sprinkle, so we're going to do colour here, and then you sprinkle some cayenne pepper on top. So that's another herb we're going to be looking at, is cayenne pepper. And then on top of that, you crush a whole clove of garlic. So these are little dots too, because you've finely grated it or you've crushed it. Whew, that's going to be a hot sandwich. Well, I've got some good news. There are a few other things you're going to put on it which will calm it down. Then you put big, thick slices of avocado on it. And then on the top, you put slices of tomato. There's your antibiotic sandwich. So if you've got a cold, you're getting a cold, you've got the flu, try and have 2 of those in the morning and 2 of those at your main meal. When you have it in the morning, you might have a few pieces of fruit and you might have some nuts with it. If you have it at lunchtime, you might have a big salad and a big bowl of soup with it. But it's an excellent way to get garlic in, because the bread and the olive oil underneath calm it down, and the tomato and the avocado on top calm it down. So that's your antibiotic sandwich. That's 4 raw cloves a day. If you want to use garlic for an antibiotic, but the good news is it's not only antibiotic, it's antiviral, it's antifungal, antibacterial, a wide range antimicrobial. One research paper I looked at said that it's 6 times more potent than tetracycline, and tetracycline is an average antibiotic. Isn't that good news? And remember Psalm 104 verse 14? God gave herbs for the service of man. They're there to serve you. And if you find the garlic a little bit hard on your stomach, well, if you have it with a bowl of hot soup, you'll find that will calm it down. I'm also going to give you the flu bomb. Well, at the moment, you could call it the COVID bomb. We'll call it the flu bomb. So the flu bomb, if you're not interested in the antibiotic sandwich, you might prefer to take it this way. The first ingredient is garlic. How much? How much do you dare? Some can handle 2 cloves, some can handle only a tiny clove. The next one does have a amount, 1/4 teaspoon of ginger, and the ginger is finely grated or probably just finely grated. And the next ingredient is 1 drop of eucalyptus oil. If you don't have eucalyptus oil, you can use 1 drop of tea tree oil. That's not right, is it? You'd think if she was from Australia, she could spell it. Eucalyptus. There you go. 1 drop of eucalyptus oil or 1 drop of tea tree oil. One lady said, but it says on the bottle, not fit for human consumption, you can't take it. I said, well, I'm not suggesting you have half a cup. 1 drop, 1 drop. Also cayenne pepper. How much cayenne pepper? As much as you dare. Some people can handle a light sprinkle, some people can handle half a teaspoon. I'll leave it up to you. Lemon. If the lemons are falling off the tree, you might do the juice of 2 lemons. If lemons are $1 a lemon, you might have a squeeze. And 1 teaspoon of honey. Believe me, you could put 4 teaspoons of honey in there and it won't improve it. 1's enough. And you put that with half a cup of hot water. And yes, you drink it. The good news is you don't have to chew all these little bits, just throw it down. So whenever you get a cold or a flu, take a flu bomb 3 times a day. And you will find that all these heating herbs will bring relief to your symptoms, and it'll also help to heal. In fact, what some people have told me, they have 3 of those a day. They eat very lightly, They keep to those 8 laws, lots of sleeps, exercise every day, often in 3 days. Now that's pretty good, isn't it? In 3 days they've recovered. I'd like to move over to cayenne pepper now. Cayenne pepper, and this is often confused with nervous system stimulants, but cayenne pepper is a blood stimulant. And Leviticus 17:11 says the life of the flesh is in the blood. So anything that moves blood is bringing healing, because the blood contains the life. The life is oxygen. It carries as oxygen. It carries nutrition. It carries water. It carries away waste. So you get more blood into the area and you will get healing. You can use cayenne pepper internally and you can use it externally. So internally, let's start at the top of the gastrointestinal tract. It'll help to relieve a sore throat. And you might say, how could cayenne pepper relieve a sore throat? Oh, there'll be an initial tingle, but don't worry about that. When that tingle settles down, there will be relief from the soreness of the throat. Let's go further down the gastrointestinal tract. We're going down the esophagus into the stomach. It will heal a stomach ulcer. And if you've got low hydrochloric acid, it'll boost hydrochloric acid production. So that's the cayenne pepper. And now it's being absorbed into the blood. In the blood, it becomes a blood thinner. It also opens the capillaries and it strengthens and can heal the arterial wall. At our health retreat, our first health retreat down in Melbourne, way down the bottom of Australia, I'm halfway up Australia at the moment. Our first health retreat down there we had for 5 years. And it was in a cooking class one day, I got the call, Barbara, quickly, a lady has had a heart attack. So I ran. It's important to keep fit. I ran, it only took me 3 minutes to get in there, and she was lying on the ground. There were about 15 people, all a little stressed out what was happening there. There was a man holding her pulse. He said the pulse is very weak. She was white. She was half conscious. Her husband said she'd already had a few heart attacks that year. I said, quick, cayenne pepper. So my right-hand girl ran with the cayenne pepper. I don't even remember how much I took, maybe half a teaspoon, and I quickly put it in her mouth. Bit of water for her to have a bit of a mouthful. The guy holding the pulse, it was about 2 minutes in, he yelled out, the pulse is strong. All the colour came back into her face and she sat up and said, what happened? Everyone in the room was going, whoa. And I said, no, it's not me, it's the cayenne pepper. We sold out of cayenne pepper that program. Now, I have read of this happening and I actually saw it. And everyone in that room, they wanted cayenne pepper with them wherever they go. It's a remarkable herb. Probably one of the first herb books I had was Back to Eden by Jethro Kloss. And there's a huge amount of information in that book. He devotes half a page to every herb, 10 pages to cayenne pepper. So I think it's almost a first aid kit in itself. I was just showing my friend that I have a tiny little bottle of cayenne pepper in the bag wherever I go. So don't forget the cayenne pepper. The chili comes from the chili family, and the cayenne pepper comes from the, you call it a bell pepper family. The cayenne is a blood stimulant, brings the blood to the area, whereas the chili pepper and the black pepper are irritants to the gastrointestinal tract. So there's a little bit of a difference there. You had a question?
Will that help the liver at all?
Will that help the liver at all? Well, blood always goes through the liver. Everything that goes into the body goes into the blood, then it goes on the portal vein, which goes straight to the liver, because the liver's the project manager. So in that way, it certainly will. But I'm glad you mentioned liver, because there are some herbs that directly affect the liver. God made every single herb a little bit different. God put actives in the herb that directly affect different parts of the body. So, one thing to remember with the liver, it's bitter to the mouth, it's sweet to the liver. So what are your bitter herbs? Dandelion. And another very bitter one is St. Mary's thistle. I think in the US you call it milk thistle. It's the same thing. These are two very bitter herbs, but they are specifics for the liver. They have the ability to cleanse the liver. They even have the ability to break up any obstructions in the liver. For the herbs to work, they must be taken regularly. So this isn't one dose. This might be 3 doses a day, and this might be for a few months. All depends on how sick the liver is. Another very bitter herb is gentian. Another herb is we've already done that one, is golden seal. And I'll talk a little bit more about golden seal in a minute. And we make this tea with the dried herbs and the fresh ginger. Ginger is often called a sweet bitter. So these will help boost digestion, and these will also help to heal the liver. No matter what the problem is in the liver, it will help to heal the liver. But I'd like to pull one out, and that is golden seal. Golden seal has a nickname. I like to know what are the specifics of the herb, because when you know the specifics of the herb, you know exactly what to do with it. Golden seal has a nickname. It's king of tonics to all mucous membranes. So now we look at where are mucous membranes? To mucous membranes. There's mucus in the eye. And so a herb tea we use for the eye, and this tea mix can be used for dry eye, it can be used for sore eyes, it can be used for conjunctivitis. And I have many people who've had dry eyes use this tea and tell me that it has helped a lot. So we're going to use golden seal because it's king of tonics to all mucous membranes. And we're also going to use a herb called eyebright. An eyebright is a herb used for all eye problems, no matter what they are. You mention an eye problem, this will help. So the rule of thumb always is, because it's going to be an eye wash, we only make a little bit of it. So you might do a quarter of a teaspoon, and ideally you use the powder, because if you use the powder you can just pour the boiling water on, and then a quarter of a teaspoon of eyebright. Eyebright is a leaf, so you'll buy it as a dried leaf. So with that you've got half a cup of boiling water, and you let it sit. So the rule of thumb with herbs is 1 teaspoon to 1 cup of water, as a rule. Sometimes there might be a slight variation. And when this cools, then you strain it. And because it's going to be an eye wash, you'd ideally strain it through a handkerchief so there's no little bits in there. And then you get a little eye wash, and you put the tea in the eye wash and wash your eye with it. And you might do that with both eyes several times a day. You'll get to know what it feels like, you'll get to know what it does. Remember, you're the doctor. If it works, do it. If it feels really good, but an hour later it's not any good, well, do it again. Do it again. You've got nothing to lose. But there is something else you can do, and only the very brave usually consider this. And that is, you put 1/8 of a teaspoon. Any guesses on what's going in? That's right. Cayenne pepper. It'll tingle, but it won't tingle for long. One man said to me, Well, the eye drops I put in for my glaucoma sting, so there's not much difference. And because it's bringing blood supply, remember, it moves blood. And one of the beauties of the cayenne pepper, whatever herb you put in, it can increase its intensity because it's a blood mover. And how often do you do it? Well, as much as you need to. But something else that you can do, and this is castor oil. Castor oil will help to break up any unnatural growths in the eye, so it can help to reduce cataracts. How would you use it? You can put one drop in the eye, or you can just put a drop on your finger and wipe it over your eyelid like that. Sometimes that's a little bit easy. It'll go through the lid, it'll go through the lashes and get into the eye. So that's eye. I want to come back to golden seal now and tell you where else you can use it. Because it's king of tonics to all mucous membranes, there's something else that it has, and that is it's a very wide range antimicrobial. It is anti-staphylococcic, anti-streptococcic, antifungal, anti-yeast, antibacteria. Now notice one of the first things I said, it's anti-staphylococcic. You've heard of golden staph? Golden staph is one of those super bugs that no antibiotic seems to hit, but golden seal will kill it. Let me tell you a story of what happened to us with one of the girls that was working for us a few years ago. She used to get eczema a lot, and she'd scratch, and she'd scratch. Never should we scratch. So what can you do if you're itchy? You can do one of the best anti-itches that God gave us. Ice. Just ice it. Put the ice on, take it off. Put it on, take it off. Put it on, take it off. And you keep doing that until you can bear it. And then you freeze the whole area. Often the itch doesn't come back for a couple of hours. But if you scratch, you break the skin can get infected, and then it just gets out of control. Every freezer should have a nice supply of ice in it. So this girl, her legs got inflamed, and then she got big sores all over her legs. They were almost, I was going to say the size of a 5-cent piece. I'm not sure what the size of a dime is. Is a dime small? Okay, it was probably the size of a dime. When I go to the shop, I just pour the money out and say, I don't know what's what, just take what you need out of that. I know what Australian coins are like. Anyway, her legs were swollen, and she was walking like this. She's about 25, the girl. My husband looked at her and said, I don't like the look of them. You get to the doctor. I want to know what's happening. Now, even though she worked for us, I don't step in unless someone asks. And she never came near me, and she never asked, but Michael stepped in and said, right, you've got to do something about that. Anyway, she came back from the doctor. She had golden staph in her legs, and she had a script for about 3 different courses of antibiotics, very, very strong ones. And then she came to me and said, help. I said, okay, let's look first at these. They're the true remedies. And what I discovered is that she wasn't eating any protein. She was eating a lot of fruit and a lot of dried fruit. She was eating carbohydrates. And I said, why won't you eat lentils? And then I discovered she didn't like her father, and her father loved lentils. So we had to sort of work through that one a bit. So I said, well, I want you to have some lentils. Okay, we won't do lentils. We'll do black-eyed beans. I said, you've got to give the proper nourishment to the body. If you're not having enough protein, you cannot heal. And so we adjusted that. And I said, and I want you to stop all that fruit. You can have some fruit, but you're not going to be, I don't want you eating cups and cups of this dried fruit. It gets the sugar levels up, the sugar's just feeding, the infection was in the leg, so we had to get that right down. So we made some adjustments there. She was a very good water drinker. Sometimes she was on a computer too late, so we adjusted that and got her to sleep a bit earlier. And what I did was I made up some tea, some golden seal tea. Now it's very, very bitter. That's why if you put some ginger with it, it's a little bit more palatable, and she was willing to have that. And then I made up some straight golden seal tea, and I put some cloth bandages. What I did was I ripped up old sheets into big strips, put that on, and then wrung it out a little bit. It was just a little bit wet, and we wrapped her whole leg in these golden seal bandages. And then I cut the arm off a jumper. I think you call it a sweater, is that right? A woolen one. And I knew that would keep the moisture in. If you put plastic there, it just can't breathe. So the wool did quite a good job, and then we just tied it up at the top of her legs. And I also made a cream out of golden seal. So I had it on a very low heat and soaked the root of the golden seal in the olive oil and let it sit there for a few hours, and then when that cooled I strained that, put a bit of beeswax in, so through the day she could put the golden seal cream on her legs. And I said, you must not scratch. If it gets itchy, ice it. So then we had another bright idea. We'll make ice cubes out of the golden seal tea. So we did all of these things, and within the week the legs had gone right down and all the wound started to heal. In fact, they totally healed. But even 3 years later, she still had the scars on her legs. Now, scars can stay when you scratch. Scratching is the worst thing. So she didn't take any of the antibiotics, but we knocked it by using the golden seal. She'd been to visit her mother just before we started the treatment. Her mother rang up, very upset, and said, my daughter's working at a health retreat and look at her legs. We said, yes, we know, but your daughter's not easy to work with. She was very resistant at first. It's not until she found out what it was she was willing to do something. And the mother rang up a week later and said, I've got it. I've got the sores on my legs. I've just been to the doctor, it's golden seal. I've got these 3 strong antibiotics I have to take. So her daughter shared with her, but the mother wasn't interested. I think we found out where the daughter get the stubbornness from. But it's an illustration to show that even with golden seal, there is a herb that can deal with that. And there really is no drug that will kill golden seal. They try by doing some very strong antibiotics, but then you've got the possibility that it won't heal it, and then you've got the compromise of the gut and the gut flora not working very well. So golden seal, very, very strong, often classified as a superbug. I know one lady told me she had an internal operation. I think she had a hysterectomy, her uterus taken out. And she came home and she had a large scar, and every day her abdomen got bigger and bigger and bigger. And she woke up one morning and it was all wet and it had burst and there was blood and pus. She rang up the hospital and the hospital said, don't come in. Why did they say that? They knew it was golden staph. Where do you usually get golden staph? Unfortunately, in a hospital. They said, we'll send a nurse, we'll send a nurse. So they sent a nurse, and the nurse was totally covered in looking like she's about to walk on outer space. Well, the lady told me about this. It had happened a few years before she came to our retreat. So just an illustration to show that golden staph is something the nurses and the doctors fear because it's very, very difficult to treat. But we successfully treated it with the golden seal. Golden seal can also be used for severe irritation of the gastrointestinal tract. And this is a mix that we make. We call it gut repair. And in most cases of things like irritable bowel, Crohn's disease, colitis, that will respond to slippery elm. But we have found in very stubborn cases, we put something else with it. So the slippery elm coats, soothes and heals the lining of the gut. So we use 80% slippery elm, we use 10% golden seal. Remember what the golden seal, it's king of tonics to all mucous membranes. And we use 10% myrrh. Myrrh is a gum resin. So this is a gum resin, and this is the bark of a tree, and this is a root. Golden seal is a root. So ideally you use these powdered, and you mix it all in a jar. You shake it backwards and forwards so you've got your mix. And then the dose is 1 teaspoon to 1 cup of hot water, and that can be taken 3 times a day. We had one man come to our program, and he was about 38, and he'd had severe irritable bowel for a long time, and they were talking about cutting some of his colon out. And his mother said, let me shout you a week at a health retreat first. And he was going 10 times a day. He was on medication, and we gave him this gut repair. We gave it to him every 2 hours at first because he was going so much. By the end of the day, it had slowed right down. By the end of the day, he had no more pain in his gut. And within 24 hours, the bleeding had stopped from his colon. He was so happy that he walked around with the jar. He wouldn't let it out of his sight. Well, the good news is, and of course there was a change in diet, the common allergens. It's important to know the common allergens because I find with most diseases, these 5 common allergens are playing a part. Now, someone can be eating these 5 foods all their life and have no problem at all. And then they get a sickness, and then these can certainly contribute to it. It's refined sugar. Refined sugar is a pure acid, so it just feeds disease almost no matter what. Creates a very acid environment. Peanuts are known, and Dr. Colin Campbell in his book, The China Study, he shows how he could, he shows the source of the liver cancer in the Philippines was peanuts. He said every jar of peanut he tested had aflatoxin in it. And aflatoxin is a mold waste that directly affects the liver. Dairy, and what Dr. Colin Campbell found was that, and he did a lot of experiments with this, he injected every rat with aflatoxin. And 5 of the rats that he did, he only did 5% animal protein. The other 5, he did 20% animal protein. The ones with 20% animal protein all died of liver cancer. The ones with 5% animal protein, no cancer at all. Again, showing it's not the microbe, it's not what comes in you, it's actually what the microbe finds. Will it find a good food supply? Is it getting food that will encourage its presence in the body? Or is it receiving food that is not going to feed that harmful bacteria or yeast? Also, the hybridized wheat, the hybridization of the wheat changed the structure of the wheat and created something that is quite toxic. I was reading a book called Temperance by the author Ellen White, and she gave a little scenario in there. It's page 12 of the book Temperance, where she said Satan and his angels had gathered together and they were having a conference about what could they do to bring the most suffering to humanity. This is the roaring lion that 1 Peter 5 verse 8 talks about. That your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walks about whom he can devour. So this little illustration is an illustration of that. And then Satan himself came up with a plan. He would take the fruit of the vine. Now we know what alcohol has done. Caused a lot of problems. Then there's a little break. And the wheat. and other articles that God made for food, and he would convert them into poisonous substances. And we know that that has happened with the wheat. Dr. William Davis has written a book called Wheat Belly, and he shows exactly what they've done to the wheat. I'm so appreciative of Tristan and his company Simple Needs that's making this magnificent bread so we don't have to eat the wheat. And it's easy in Whole Foods, Sprouts, these shops that you can get brown rice pastas, you can get spelt pastas, ancient grain pastas. There's so many alternatives today that you don't have to eat the wheat. And when you realise what they've done to the wheat, that explains the gluten intolerance. That's pandemic proportions. And the other pandemic is diabetes. And the other thing that was changed in the hybridisation was the starch structure. That gets the starch structure, starch structure gets the blood sugar level up even higher than refined sugar. And the last one is oats, and I'm putting oats there because for about 30% of people, the oats can be an allergy. So it's probably the least allergic. I find at our retreat about 30% of people can't handle the oats. Now if you love oats, you have no health problem, eat oats. But ideally they must be cooked. A good way is to soak them overnight and then cook them in the morning or put them in a slow cooker overnight, because the starch structure has to be broken down by cooking to make them digestible. So they're the 5 common allergens. And those 5 common allergens must be stopped, especially in the area of irritable bowel, Crohn's disease, colitis. They have an irritating effect on the colon. Do you remember what page 127 of the Ministry of Healing said? In case of sickness, cause should be ascertained, unhealthful conditions changed, wrong habits corrected, then nature is to be assisted. So even though this may not have caused it, because the person's eaten it all their life with no problem, sometimes maybe they got a touch of food poisoning, maybe they went through high stress in their life. Some people have been on a medication for something else, but it irritated the lining of the gut. It could be a whole lot of things that started it. But to conquer it, these things must stop. And then the herbs come in, and little by little, the body can heal. So even though man was taking it every 2 hours for the first day, by the second day, it was every 3 hours. And then by the 4th day, it was every 4 hours. So you adjust it. Your body will tell you what to do. That's why you're the doctor. If it works, do it. If it doesn't work, keep adjusting till it does. And remember, sometimes you need to give it a little bit of time. Golden seal is also an excellent herb for sinus problems. I have found with sinus problems, these foods irritate. These foods cause a lot of excess mucus to be built up in that area. Now what may have started it is breathing in chemicals, breathing in molds, maybe high stress. Something might have triggered the start of it, but they will definitely feed it because they're all mucus forming. And so all the mucus forms up here. In the 1990s, a group of doctors discovered in the Mayo Clinic that sinus is caused by fungus. We had an ear, nose and throat specialist do our program, and well, she's a specialist nurse. She says we do a lot of operations on the sinus as ear, nose and throat specialist. She said when they're under general anaesthetic, she said we're pulling green slime out. And she said the specialists acknowledge it's fungus. So fungus is an opportunist organism. And where does it like to live in your house? In the dark, moist areas. Same with the body, in the dark, moist areas, way up here. So what often started the problem is something irritating, and then the mucus was built up, and then the mucus stayed there, and these foods came in and started feeding it, and the fungus starts to develop. So how can we eliminate it? Stop the irritating foods and sniff. Now we're going to use golden seal in another way. Sniff golden seal powder. Remember, it's king of tonics to mucous membranes, and that's all lined with mucous membranes. It's antimicrobial, it's antifungal. Don't sniff too much or you'll feel like the top of your head's blowing off. Now, in the old days, they used to use snuff, didn't they? Well, if you've got sinus problems, it's time to use some snuff. Golden seal. You just put a tiny little bit on your wrist, come up near the mirror and sniff. Don't go, oh, you won't be very happy. Tiny little sniffs. Do one nostril and do the other. Golden seal is a very expensive herb. It's one of the most expensive herbs we get. Probably not quite as expensive as frankincense, but it's a very expensive herb, but you only need the tiniest little bit. And let me tell you a story of a lady who came to us a few years ago, and she had constant headaches, and I discovered their headaches were due to clogged sinuses. She was overweight, she was a miserable lady. So we got her to start sniffing, and most of the food she ate was in that list there. So at the retreat we didn't give her any of those food, we don't serve those foods anyway, and we made a program for her to go home with. I didn't hear again. 2 years later, we had a health program and a lady walked in with a big smile on her face. She said, hello. I said, hello. She said, do you remember me? I said, I'm trying. And it was the same girl. She'd lost weight. She had a new outfit on. She looked so good. She looked 10 years younger. I mean, she was only in her late 30s. And I said, tell me what happened to you. She said, I did exactly what you told me. She said, I changed my diet, I started exercising, I sniffed the golden seal. She said, since I've left the health retreat, I haven't had one headache tablet. Because she said, I no longer have headaches. She said, that golden seal, that cleaned it out. She said, sometimes when I'm blowing out of my nose, looks like green barley. And I thought, did she sniff green barley? And then I realised she's just referring to the colour of the waste that she's blowing out of her nose. Far better that we do that than have to go under anaesthetic and have the surgeon pull it out, which may not be as gentle as doing it naturally. And how often do people have the operation, but it all comes back because they don't stop what's causing it, because they don't know what's causing it. No wonder Ellen White said in that passage I related when I first began, the only hope of better things is the education of people in right principles. Most people don't realise. She said to me, I stopped all of those foods. She said, I did everything you said. I've never had another headache. She said, the sinus took a few months before it was totally clear and I had no pain at all. But she said, it is all clear now. She said, I've lost weight, I feel great. She said, after a year, my mother said, I don't like what's happening to you. I think you're losing weight too fast. I want you to go and have a blood test. So she said, I went and had a blood test, and the doctor said, wow. He said, this is the best blood I've seen for years. You can also use the golden seal for urinary tract infections. Many people will conquer their urinary tract infections just by drinking lots of water. Lots of water. Flush it out that way. But remember, golden seal is king of tonics to all mucous membranes, and the lining of your bladder is a mucous membrane. The urethra is a mucous membrane. So you can take the golden seal in a capsule form or in a tablet form or as the tea. Remember, it's not that pleasant a tea because it is just so bitter. But any way you take it. So with the UTI, golden seal, and another specific for UTI is cranberry. Now, cranberry is an incredibly bitter berry, and most cranberries that you buy, in fact, I was in Trader Joe's a few months ago and I decided to look at all the, they have dried cranberries, and they all had sugar. All of them have sugar. So it's probably better to buy the cranberry in a tablet form or a capsule form. Apparently they do some dried cranberries with concentrated apple juice, but my daughter got cranberries once and she cooked it in some pretty strong apple juice, and when and then let it simmer down and dry them, you could hardly even eat them, they were so bitter. So they're incredibly bitter. So that bitter also would be a help to the liver. What cranberry does is it causes the lining of the bladder to become slippery so that the microbes can't get a hold on the lining of the bladder, which is an interesting way that the cranberry works. So if someone has UTI, they might take a capsule of golden seal and a capsule of cranberry 3 times a day, something like that. When we looked at heart health a few nights ago, we looked at the cayenne pepper, but we also looked at, and remember the cayenne pepper, I'll just recap on that, it thins the blood. Cayenne pepper dilates the capillaries, and cayenne pepper also can repair and rebuild the arterial wall. So that's why it's so good for heart. The hawthorn berry is also an excellent heart herb. Now the hawthorn berry directly affects the heart. If the blood pressure's low, it'll bring it up. If it's high, it'll bring it down. And that can be a puzzle to many, but not when you realise Psalm 104 verse 14, where the Bible says God gave herb for the service of man. So herbs come into your body and they work with your body. So the hawthorn berry can do that. But the rule of thumb for making the hawthorn berry tea is 2 teaspoons of the dried berry to 1 cup of water. And because it's a dried berry, there's a gentle simmer. So when you're making a tea with flowers or with leaves, you just pour the boiling water on and cover it. Make sure you cover it because as the steam goes up, you can lose some of those essential oils. But whenever you're dealing with roots or barks or berries, dried berries, you always do a simmer. So with this, it's a gentle simmer, and usually it's for about 10-15 minutes, and then you must have the lid on. At Misty Mountain, we have bought lots of glass coffee percolators from second-hand shops. Those glass coffee percolators are excellent for boiling your teas in. So, and then you let that cool, and so what a person would usually do is drink 1 quart of that a day, that's 4 glasses. Or if it's taken in tablet or capsule form, you can be taking 4,000 to 5,000 milligrams a day. It's a very safe herb, and we have seen many people get off their blood pressure medication by taking the hawthorn berry. An important part of conquering high blood pressure in the heart is implementing those 8 laws, making sure exercise is implemented every day, adequate amounts of water, the plant-based diet, and then implement the cayenne pepper. How much cayenne pepper? You might start with 1/4 teaspoon 3 times a day, and then you might build up to 1/2 teaspoon. If a person just can't take it, they could try the capsule. Now we're going to go back to what I first began with. We're going to go back to respiratory. And we're going to go to chest, or basically lungs. And there are some herbs that directly affect the chest and the lungs. And I'm going to tell you the story of my son Peter. My son Peter, at the age of 10 months, he had a bad cold, and everything I did didn't do a lot, and I saw that he was struggling with breathing, and I hadn't seen this in the other children. He was my 5th child. So I rushed him to the doctor. If ever you're concerned, please take your child to the doctor and have it assessed. He had severe physiological asthma. My father had asthma. I'm one of 5 children. My younger sister had asthma. I didn't see my father conquer his asthma till he was 50 and stopped this list. I didn't see my younger sister conquer asthma. And by the way, I'm the elder sister. I was 8 when she was born. And Mum used to get me to sit on her bed and read her stories and sing songs to her. And I remember just watching my little sister trying to breathe. It just broke my heart. I felt so helpless. And sometimes the ambulance would come and take my little sister away. So it just broke my heart because she was my baby. So you can imagine how I felt when my 5th child, I gave birth to him in a rainforest. In fact, my attendants thought I had a long time to go and didn't come, so I delivered him myself. You can do that when you've had a few home births. He was just breastfed, and here he had asthma. So you see how the genes come through. I took him to the hospital, and we're an hour from the hospital, 3 or 4 times, because I just feared for his life. His nostrils would flare with every breath, and his whole torso from the hips to the neck would go like this with every breath. A very scary, scary thing to see your little one like that. And they gave him Ventolin, and Ventolin opens the capillaries. After one asthma attack and he settled down and I took him back home, I was reading in the paper about Ventolin, and it said Ventolin reduces lung capacity. And I thought, the very drug that I'm giving to my baby to save his life and get the bronchioles open is reducing lung capacity? This was beyond me. Now, Peter is 35 or 36 now. So this is when Peter, by the time he was 14 months old, I thought, I've got to do something else. I can't just wait for an asthma attack and then take him to the hospital. And the drugs, they didn't seem to do a lot. What helped the most was if I just held him. If I just held him and kept him calm. So I went to a naturopath. And when I took Peter into the naturopath, he said, this is a very sick boy. And I said, no, he's not sick at the moment. He could tell, I think, by Peter's eyes. And so he told me a whole lot of things to do. He said, when Peter gets an asthma attack, do some hot and cold fermentations on the chest. And we looked at water therapy through the week. He said, also, take him off all food except for watermelon. He was still breastfed at the time, so he had breast milk and just watermelon. He said, whenever he gets a cold, just give him watermelon. So what we had to do was one child would go in the bedroom and read Peter stories while we'd all eat, and then we'd clean up the table, and then bring Peter out and give him watermelon and put the other child in the bedroom eating his meal, because when they see food, they just want to eat. And he said, mix up slippery elm with a herb in it called licorice. And licorice, it's called an expectorant. An expectorant meaning that it can loosen what's on the lungs and bring it up. And the slippery elm coats and soothes the lining of the whole gut, but the throat. And he also asked me to give Peter an enema. Now that's not easy on a 14-month-old child. How are you going to give a 14-month-old child an enema? And I thought, little Peter loves Big Brother James' submarine motor. James had a submarine and it had a little motor on it that had a battery in it. So I went to James and I said, James, can we give Peter your submarine motor just while we put the tip of the enema in? And of course James agreed. We're all concerned about poor little Peter who was sick. So when he got his next cold, whenever he got a cold, within 24 hours he'd go into severe breathing distress. So as soon as he got a cold, I put him on the watermelon. I gave him the licorice and slippery elm 3 times a day. And when I could see the breathing distress coming, then we set up to give him an enema. So he laid down and we gave Peter the little motor, and Peter was just shocked because Peter's not allowed to touch James' submarine motor. And Peter was just looking at it. And everything was ready to just slip the nozzle of the enema into his little anus. And I nodded to James. James turned the propeller on. And I could have done anything to Peter right at that moment. Peter was just... And so I was able to put the tip of the enema in and put about a cup of warm water in and then take it out. And then I laid him down and massaged his tummy, and then I picked him up and just sat him on a little pot. Again, Peter's just in seven heavens looking at this submarine propeller going round and round and round. And then the water came out with some of the contents of the colon. I washed him a little bit and put his, you call it a diaper, back on. And then I smiled and took the propeller off him and turned it off, and he let me because he was just amazed that Peter wouldn't have known what had happened in the last 10 minutes. But you know what I found? That enema took breathing distress from 24 hours down to 5 hours. What a difference. 24 hours with your child like this, it's very, very difficult. 5 hours was still a bit tough, but I found that the hot and colds brought a little bit of relief, but that enema seemed to cut it right down. So Peter was about 14 months when we did this. He got another cold when he was about 18 months, and we did the same thing. And then I fell pregnant with my next baby. I think we went through that about 3 times with Peter. When Peter was 2.5, I went into labour for the birth of my 6th baby, and Peter got a cold. What has God said? He said in 2 Timothy 1 verse 7, I have not given you the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. And remember, faith grows strong by earnest conflict with fear and doubt. I was so tempted to be just terrified. The thought of being in labour and Peter's got a breathing distress. So I just put my whole life in God's hands. I put Peter's life in God's hands. And I'd been squatting all through my labour, so I had a fairly quick, easy labour. I squatted all through my labour, and when the baby was born, the whole baby shot out of me with the bag intact. And Peter was there and all the other children, and Peter had a cold, but it never went into breathing distress. Peter never had another asthma attack. Isn't that incredible? Genetics may load the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. And if you look at Peter today, there's a picture of him in the back of my book. There's me, I'm the little one at the end of the row. Then my eldest daughter, Emma, and then James, who's fairly big, and then Jessica and Julia and Peter. And if you look at Peter, he's like this, muscles like this. How many asthmatics look like that? Well, Peter is not an asthmatic anymore. And so that information really empowered me, and it helped me to go even further. About 4 years later, the naturopath rang me and he said, Barbara, I'm about to give a talk to the Asthma Foundation. He said, I would like you to, but I know you're very shy and I know you're very busy. He said, tell me what you do, because he said, you know more than me now about asthma. That's how we learn. That's our school. That's why when Ellen White says every person should have a practical training on how to enable one rightly to do this, that's how you get it. You do it on yourself, you do it on your children. That's how I got my practical training. He said, tell me what you do. So I told him what I do, and there are a few other things that he hadn't told me, but I'd worked that one out. He rang me back 2 days later. He said it was very interesting. At first, the Asthma Foundation were very resistant, but he said after a while they softened, and I was telling them the story of Peter. And he said a lady came up to me at the end of the meeting and she was explaining her little boy, and she said, and it was just as if she was explaining Peter, severe physiological asthma. He said this little boy is about the age of Peter, so which was about 5. And he said, this little boy has a glycerin enema every day, he's on cortisone every day, and they've given him 2 weeks to live. And he said, and look at Peter. I got off the phone very sobered by that, very sobered. That lady doesn't know. That lady gets terrified and rushes to the hospital and they give the drugs, but drugs never cure disease. They just change the form and location. Now, absolutely a drug can save a life in a crisis. We're not talking about crises, we're talking about disease here. Peter has 2 little children now, and neither of them have asthma. I believe that Peter was able to change his genes because he conquered asthma at a very young age. By the time he gives birth to babies, the asthma gene has gone so weak. Isn't that good news? So licorice isn't expectant. There are a few other herbs, and this was another herb that I used with Peter. It was plantain. Plantain's also called ribwort, and there's the narrow-leaf plantain. It's called ribwort because of the ribs, and it has a seed head that basically looks like that. And then you've got the broadleaf plantain, which is what we had. And the leaves have got those ribs in them again. But this seed head, it has an arrowhead too, but it's basically a long arrowhead with all the seeds in it. You may be familiar with it. It's called plantain, or it's also called ribwort. I used to pick armfuls of this and pour boiling water on it. It was so strong it'd almost go black. And then I'd put a bit of honey in there and a squeeze of lemon, and oh, Peter loved it. You know, when you only give your children water, they'll love the herb teas with a little lemon and honey in them. He drank copious amounts of that. And I used to say, this one's for Peter. So, of course, that made him love it even more because he was the one that could drink it. And I think that also played a part. There are a few other herbs that you can add, and that's marshmallow. Marshmallow has similar properties to the licorice. Sorry, not to the licorice, to the slippery elm. Because the slippery elm, basically it's got slimy mucilage in it, which is what the marshmallow has, and that helps to coat and soothe the lining of the gut and also the trachea. But licorice is probably one of the number 1 expectorants, and plantain certainly does that as well. I know in a lot of shops, health food shops like Trader Joe's and Plant Foods, you can buy cough mixtures, and ideally you buy a cough mixture that's in glycerin, and often there'll be a whole range. I think hops is another one they usually put in. Another one we often put in is thyme. Thyme also helps because it's a bronchodilator. Which means it opens the bronchioles. So what I've been doing at Misty Mountain, because I've been unable to work in the health centre for a year, I've been making all the glycerin tinctures. So I'm making cough mixtures using all of that. And sometimes I'll put a bit of echinacea in too. Echinacea's known to boost the immune system. Now, the book I mentioned to you earlier, Holistic Herbal by David Hoffman, it shows in the back how you can make herbal tinctures. But we just get the dried herb, and so you've got a jar like this, and you put about this much dried herb in, and then you'll fill it up with half glycerin, half water, shake it, and let it sit for a few weeks. But in the book, it tells you the exact measurements. So that's making a glycerin tincture. So if you can't find a chest and lung cough mixture, you can make your own with the glycerin tinctures. Are there any questions as we close off? Yes?
Can you do a like an irrigation?
Can you do an inhalation?
No, irrigation.
Irrigation, you can do an irrigation
So
with
make a tea?
with the golden seal tea.
Yeah.
And to make the tea, you pour the boiling water on it. That's true.
How?
Okay. And how did you do that? Did you use the gel? Okay. Aloe vera. Aloe vera has a growth stimulant in it. So, and it's slimy like our mucous membrane, so the aloe vera, well, I haven't heard of that one, of putting aloe vera up the nose, but it's certainly very soothing, the aloe vera. It is very bitter, but the bitterness is the yellow slime that just lines the leaf. If you cut that off and just have the clear gel, it's not as bitter. Okay, we can take another question because I'll repeat the question. Yes?
Where do you recommend getting these herbs? Do you have a place that you recommend?
Where do I recommend getting the herbs? Unfortunately, I'm not familiar with herbal supplies in the US. I guess you'd just investigate to find out where you could get them. Yes?
When you were talking about the eye flush, like with the cayenne, are you talking about flushing your eye with a whole cup of water, or can we just put a couple of drops in our eye?
What you usually get is a little eye bath, and a little eye bath I think takes about 2 teaspoons. You can get them from the pharmacy, and you put the herb tea in there, and that eye bath fits to your eye, and you usually blink a little bit and you wash the eye like that.
Okay.
Yes?
What do you recommend for swelling in the feet and ankles that's not cardiac related?
Well, you'd have to look at why the feet are swollen.
Malnutrition, possibly?
Yeah, it could be a few things. Could be a few things. You'd have to look at when it all started. But one of the best ways is to get on the rebounder, the little mini trampoline. Just even, going like this on the rebounder if you're unable to jump. It is a direct stimulant to the lymphatic system, and the swollen legs and ankles is lymphatic fluid.
Okay, thank you.
I have 2 questions. This came in over the phone line. What do you do for calcium on the heart?
One would have to investigate why there's calcium on the heart. There shouldn't be calcium on the heart, so that would take a bit of investigation.
Okay, second question, nodules in the throat and lungs.
Nodules in the throat and lungs. Again, we have to investigate. Remember, Ellen White says, in case of sickness, the cause should be ascertained. So, nodule in the face and lungs, it indicates to me there's been irritation in that area over many years, which can cause the nodules to develop. One would have to look at how the person lives, their diet, to find out why that might have happened. So what I have found is there's no quick fixes. You've got to find out why these things are developing in the body, and remember, ascertain the cause, unhealthful conditions change, wrong habits corrected. So in the nose and throat, I know that castor oil will break it down. You could put castor oil up here in the nose. Around the throat, you could wear castor oil compresses. That may help.
Did you put anything in the enema besides water?
No.
Just water?
No, yes.
Okay.
Just water. I know in the old days they'd do soapy water, but that's very irritating to the lining of the colon. No, all you need is water, and some people might put a squeeze of lemon in there, but I just use water. Charcoal, yeah, charcoal wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, I was going to make a comment about the cayenne pepper. Yesterday, I picked a bunch from our garden, And I went to slice them. We were going to dry them and that. And so my wife says, "Oh, you need to wear gloves." And I said, "Oh, forget the gloves." So I sliced up a bowl, you know, a big bowl of them. And I went and I washed my hands. But even after I washed my hands a couple of times, I touched my eye and it was burning like crazy. I can't imagine how you would intentionally put cayenne pepper in your eye. It doesn't make sense.
Well, maybe the cayenne that people buy is not as potent as yours.
Maybe not.
There are some hands over to the right side too.
My sister taught me this trick because we eat a lot of chili, we're Mexicans. But whenever chili gets on your hands, even cayenne pepper, just put lemon juice on it and it takes away that heat. FYI.
Okay, put the lemon juice on the cayenne pepper and it'll take the heat away. Oh. Yeah, when you put chili on your hands, lemon juice to take the bite away. Yeah. Yeah.
Does it matter what Scoville, like when you're getting, when you're ordering your cayenne, they have different Scoville levels. Does that matter? Scoville?
Sorry, say that again.
The heat unit. The heat unit.
In Australia, we don't have heat units, so I'm not familiar with heat units, but the hotter the better.
And then the other question was, when you're putting it on the sandwich, would it be the powder form or would it be the diced?
Usually powder form.
Okay.
I have a comment and a question. Well, actually, the comment was, or not the comment, but somebody asked about where to obtain herbs. There's a store in Winston called House of Health, and they have on their wall, it's just a health food store, but on their wall they have all kinds of herbs, and you can obtain it there, all of the ones that she's speaking of and beyond. My question is regarding oats. Do you know if the steel-cut oats has the same glycemic index as rolled oats?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it wouldn't differ?
If someone has an allergy to them, it doesn't matter how they're prepared. The allergy's there.
I have an online question. Is organic wheat flour not hybridized?
That's right. Yes. The only wheat that's not hybridized is spelt, kamut, enkenhorn. They're the original grains.
The best herbs to eliminate using metformin, yeah.
To eliminate. Okay, well, metformin is a diabetic medication, and we discussed diabetes the other day. We've seen people within a week be able to get off their metformin by changing their diet and lifestyle.
Dermatologists recommend an oral medication for inflammation. Can you suggest a natural remedy?
So the dermatologist, so that means that skin problems, so inflammation in the skin, the best anti-inflammatory on the skin is ice, but at the same time change the diet internally and take away the common allergens. One lady contacted me, her baby had very bad eczema, 10-month-old, and I said to stop the known allergens. After 1 month, she contacted me and said, there is no difference. Look at my baby's still covered in eczema. And I said, a little bit longer, you got 1 more month to go. At exactly 2 months, she sent me a photograph of her baby totally eczema-free. The baby was breastfed, so the mother had to stop the known allergens. We've seen that happen many, many times.
Anyone else?
I actually don't have a question. I actually have more of a testimony that goes with what Barbara has been teaching about during the diabetes lecture and the one the other day on the wonderful fats. 10 months ago, I went on a health journey, and went vegan ketogenic. And I've lost 137.6 pounds in those 10 months.
Sure.
I've also reversed my type 2 diabetes, my fatty liver disease, and I no longer have to sleep with a CPAP machine. So it can be done, because I know some people were asking the other day about the ketogenic diet and if it can be done vegan, and it can.
Well, congratulations, well done. That's impressive. 137 pound off the CPAP machine, reverse the diabetes. Thank you for that testimony. Yes?
Now, what do you think about concentrated lemon juice? Is that all right to use?
I think if you've got nothing else, you could use it, but ideally you use the fresh ones. There's no better than the fresh.
I was very interested in the chest lung piece you just did and wrote a lot of notes, but I got a little lost at the end. So the licorice, enema, plantain, marshmallow, hops, thyme, echinacea. And the enema, what was the enema made from? Is some of this making up the enema?
Water.
Water? What besides, you can't, water's
Water.
not an enema.
It appears that when the colon is empty, it takes a lot of pressure off the rest of the body, but it certainly made a difference to his breathing distress.
But I mean, what did you put in him?
Water. Next question. Water.
The enema, the whole thing about the propeller.
It's just warm water. No, the little propeller was to take his attention away.
To put
so
water
I could
in
give
him?
him the enema.
To just put water in him? Okay.
Warm water, not cold. It's just warm water. Now, I have a comment too, is we had a question about the sourdough bread. So what we did was, Tristan did a little bit of a search. Did you know that in the mid-1850s, Louis Pasteur discovered yeast? But it was not used industrial until the Industrial Revolution in the early 1900s. So the writer Ellen White would have eaten sourdough bread. Isn't that interesting? Because that was the only bread. Yes?
Nutritional yeast. I know we learn about it at UC Pines, and they use it extensively there, and we use it at home. I can eat 2 pounds a day. Is it good or not?
I don't use nutritional yeast at all. I use no yeast at all. And you'll find in my book, Self-Heal by Design, I think it's going to be available for sale after tonight's lecture. I don't use yeast at all. You can't kill yeast. So when I'm dealing with people that have yeast problems, it's no yeast at all. So I know a lot of people like to put nutritional yeast on their popcorn, but try putting olive oil, salt, garlic powder and onion powder, just as nice. So there's lots of alternatives to using nutritional yeast.
Raise it higher because I'm not seeing it. Oh.
We recently had someone in the family who was sick, and we were wondering if there are specific herbs that would bring down the temperature, fever.
To bring down the temperature, I never wanted to bring it down because it has a purpose. But sometimes when people are very, very hot and terribly uncomfortable, you would bring it down, and the best way to bring it down is water. So for those who weren't here the other day, I'm going to write the 3 things to remember with a fever. Number 1, fever is your friend. God put it there for a reason. It boosts your white blood cells, boosts your immune system in the most powerful way possible. It's an excellent fighter for disease, is the fever. And water puts the fire out. So it's very important to make sure the person's well hydrated, sipping on water, sipping on herb teas, Sipping on coconut water. Sometimes when people can't take water, they can take the coconut water. Sucking on ice, any way to get that water in. And on the outside, puts fire out. So put them in not a hot bath, not a cold bath, tepid bath. Wrap them up in a cold wet sheet and a woolly blanket. And even just putting their feet in hot water can bring the heat of the fever down to the feet. And remember this, that when all the, we'll call it trash, that's the American word, when the trash is gone, when all the rubbish is burnt up, the fire goes out. And if someone takes Tylenol to put the temperature down, as soon as the Tylenol wears off, what happens to the temperature? Because it hasn't done its job. So let it do its job. So I never try and put fires out. I work with the body to bring about that.
I have a testimony towards that. I tested positive for COVID about 4 weeks ago, and had a very high temperature. Well, a moderate temperature. It was about 101. And I said, it's not hot enough. So jump in a bath, heat the bath up to about 108, 109 is about what you can manage. And I was aiming for 104. I didn't quite get there. I got to about 103.8. And as soon as you get there, get out, wrap in a sheet, wrap in a towel, in a shower curtain, because you're going to get really wet, and then cover yourself in wool blankets. And I sweated for like 2.5, 3 hours, wrapped up like that, drinking lots and lots of water, and having someone constantly changing an ice rag on your head, because you'll get very, yeah, this guy right here. And the fever left me after that, and I was completely well in a couple of days after that. So, you know, you can eliminate even this virus with assisting nature and ridding the body from impurities, which is what the fever is trying to do.
So, if you get COVID and get a fever, praise God, because you'll get over it so much quicker if you get a fever. And fever has been used for centuries all through Europe to heal disease. They're your fever baths, they're the steam sauna baths. That's what they do. They create the fever because it has such a powerful healing effect on the body.
I can't pronounce this word, but I have Sclatica.
Sciatica?
Yeah, thank you. I have sciatica and I'm losing strength on that leg. Constant pain, burning, numbing. I don't want surgery, suffering for years.
So he needs to visit a chiropractor. The chiropractors are the bone doctors. They know that spine. So it's a pinched nerve. The sciatica nerve goes down the back here. So it just may be that it needs some adjustment. So, one more.
My husband and I received a text message from someone from our church and in Huntersville, and this man is referring to an event that happened in southern Chile a few years ago, and he wrote and he said, "Happy Sabbath. If you could, when you see Barbara O'Neill, tell her my friend and I made a poultice of charcoal and ground flaxseed and applied it to an abscess on a 90-year-old man's leg, wrapped it in cabbage leaves, and then in plastic wrap, and finally a towel. We elevated the leg and changed it twice a day. His life was saved. We learned that from Barbara's videos. Praise God, amen." And he wanted us to let you know that. And he even said the lady's name, it was at a place in southern Chile, Elsie Wandersleben, or I'm not sure, but he just wanted to let you know.
That's good news, very good news. Thank you. Thank you for that. Another amazing story of the body's ability to heal itself when given the right conditions.
I just want to make a comment too. With the onions, some people look at you really strange when you say putting onions on your feet for a cough. But our son has heart conditions and he's diabetic, and so when he gets sick, we want to make sure he's comfortable. And This was back in 2019. He got a bad cough, and from your videos, I did the onions to the feet, and it worked every night, and then I got sick. And I didn't want to have to do the onions that night because I just wanted to go to sleep. So I was like, I think you can just go to sleep. So I went and got in bed, and then I heard him coughing. So I finally like, okay, I'll get up and do the onions. So I got him back up, we did the onions, put him back to bed, and he went right back to sleep.
Yeah, it's an impressive treatment. So
Okay.
Thank you for your attention. I'm impressed that you're all still awake. I know
Yeah,
it's
amen.
not easy to stay awake in the afternoon. So we have another meeting tonight at 6:30.
Yes.
And we're going to have a look at the medical missionary work. So basically this is how can you start or be involved in the medical missionary work and why. So we're going to look at that tonight.